Forgive me, I must start by pointing out that 3 years after a horrific financial crisis caused by massive fraud, not a single financial executive has gone to jail, and that's wrong.
I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin of the New York Times' DealBook, here with Charles Ferguson, the director of Inside Job. And I'm curious, what is the single issue that you worry about most today?
Well, I think that I would name two. One of them is that in another 10 years this could happen again. And the other, which is related but different and in some ways even more disturbing, is that there has been no justice done, and there has not been in particular a single criminal prosecution.
Have you had any choice encounters with people who actually were in the film, who were unhappy, or other folks that you've run into either around Manhattan or elsewhere?
Well, I guess a week ago I had a rather interesting encounter with William Dudley, who's now the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The research department of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York actually requested a screening of the film and a meeting with me, and he attended.
And what was his reaction?
Well, he said that he was broadly happy with and in agreement with the film, which surprised me a little bit, but he was in front of a bunch of his employees. That may have had an effect on the way that he conducted himself. I don't know.
Now, many of the folks who were on the police force today were arguably at the scene of the crime at the time, whether it be Tim Geithner or Ben Bernanke or many of the others. And I'm curious, when you look at the environment today post the regulatory reform package that's been put in place, do you feel any better?
Not much, no. I think it's a very disturbing situation, and says something very disturbing about the condition of American politics, that there's been very little change, despite the fact that I think many people, when they voted for Barack Obama and voted for the Congress that they voted for 2 years ago, thought that this problem would be dealt with. But it hasn't been, and in fact, the people running economic and regulatory policy in the Obama administration are in many cases people who contributed to causing the crisis, and in some cases, you know, there's fairly clear evidence that they conducted themselves in very, very unethical ways.
At no point did the administration ever go to all the major institutions and say, you know, this is serious, tell us what your positions are, you know, no bullshit, where are you?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, that's what the regulators, that's their job, right? Their job is to understand the exposure across these different institutions, and they have a very refined understanding that I think became more refined as the crisis proceeded. So,
forgive me, but that's clearly not true. I mean,
what do you mean it's not true?
As a storyteller, a final question. When you film somebody like a Glenn Hubbard and get him into one of those sort of great moments for the viewer, how do you get there? I assume you call him up and you say, I want to hear from you, get your advice. I mean, because I assume that on the other end of it, there's a feeling of a bait and switch, and I'm curious sort of, as a filmmaker and as a storyteller, how you do your craft.
Well, there was no bait and switch. Essentially, everybody who was interviewed for the film was given the same information. We told them who we were. A few people asked for my CV or information about me, which we supplied. We said that we were making a documentary. We described the subject of the documentary. Some people had further detailed questions. Most didn't. Glenn Hubbard did not. We asked him to be interviewed. He agreed to be interviewed. You know.
Any reaction from them afterwards?
Well, obviously, some of those people were extremely unhappy, but, you know, too bad.
Last question. Anything in the DVD that we should look for? Any outtakes or other things that may surprise us?
Well, there are some things that certainly I found interesting, and there were a lot of things in the film, some of which are in the DVD. Excuse me, a lot of things in the interviews, some of which are in the DVD, that couldn't go in the film just for reasons of time or structure, and so, but which we thought were interesting, and so a lot of those are in the DVD.
Charles Ferguson, good luck and thank you. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin of the New York Times' DealBook.